I had a question about neutral tint. What is neutral tint and how is it used in a watercolor painting? This is Neutral Tint by Daniel Smith, and it's actually a combination of 3 different pigments. If we look at the label here, the pigments that are used are lamp black, quinacridone violet, and phthalo blue. It's kind of surprising that quinacridone violet and phthalo blue are used to make neutral tint because they are very colorful, powerful colors. But I guess in combination with the lamp black, it creates neutral tint, which is a dark, essentially it's a black that does not lean towards the cool side. So it's not a blue black. It doesn't lean towards the warm side. It's not a brown black. It doesn't lean towards the lavender. Not a purpley black, it's just right in the middle, a very neutral color. At full strength, it is pretty much black, but then of course with watercolor, you can add more water and it becomes a very pale gray tone. There's kind of an unwritten rule that watercolor painters should not use black in their paintings, but I'm going to show you how you can use neutral tint. The first way you can use it is to do a value study with neutral tint. The nice thing about this is that you don't need a whole lot. You just need a tube of neutral tint and something like this, which is a water brush. I love these little Pentel water brushes. They're inexpensive. They have a water reservoir. So you don't need to carry water, you don't have to have a water container. And if you carry this with just a tube of neutral tint, you don't need a palette, you don't have to have a pan of paint or even a mixing area. You can just work right onto your little study. And this kind of becomes my little mixing area, so to speak, even though I'm not really mixing color. But it becomes a little working area where I can get the paint onto the brush. Now I can see what value I have there. That's kind of a mid-tone, and I'm going to wipe off my brush here on a paper towel so I can get a lighter color just by squeezing this a bit and getting more water out. It's a very pale gray, and then that's basically just water. So there you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 values. If I want to get even darker, I would just dry my brush off on a paper towel. I guess you also need a paper towel or a napkin or a sweatshirt that you don't care about. And now I'm going to dip in and get full strength. So if you can see, there's actually a little bit of paint on the tip there. And this would be my darkest value. So there we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. And that's all I need to do a value study. So I could do my little sketch, either draw with the tip of the paintbrush, use some trees, whatever I'm drawing, and then come back in and fill it in with the values, or I could use a pencil or whatever. But you can see how nice this neutral tint is to use for a value study. And then to clean your brush when you're done, you just kind of get a little more water on there and wipe it off and put the lid back on. Everything's contained. No real mess to clean up. The other way that you can use neutral tint is to tone down your colors. And I think this is the most convenient to use when you're using a limited palette, where you want to have just maybe 1 or 2 yellows, 1 or 2 reds, 1 or 2 blues. If you put neutral tint into that palette, it gives you a lot more options to quickly make other colors. I think this is Hansa Yellow. I'm trying to remember if it's Hansa Yellow or Hansa Yellow. I kind of use them interchangeably, and it's a little dirty. You can see it's not quite a pure yellow. Watch what happens when I add in just a touch. I mean, really, hardly anything. Just a little bit of neutral tint. Oh, that doesn't even make a difference. There's a little bit of a difference there, but not much. I need a little bit more, I guess. What this will do is it will take it to a green color that's quite interesting. I call it kind of a spring green, or even like a cool green color. Sometimes this is the color of fields in the springtime. And that's not an easy green to mix up depending on what yellows and blues you have in your palette. So I encourage you to try this with your yellows. If you have neutral tint and you have some yellows, try it and see what kind of green you can get. The other thing that I like to use neutral tint with is the other color would be my reds or my violets. So like I have Quinacridone Rose here. And this is a beautiful color. But look how bright it is. Whoo! That's really bright. So if I was painting flowers, yeah, I might need something that bright. But if I put in neutral tint into that, it's going to tone it instantly down. And look at that. It's almost like a totally different tube of paint now, you know, just by adding in a touch of neutral tint. Now, if I put in just a bit of that yellow that I used up here, so this would be yellow and Quinacridone Rose and a bit of neutral tint, I'm going to get a color that, look at that, that's very natural looking. You see that color a lot in foliage, you know, in shrubs. It's just a really pretty color, even for like buildings that might be red in real life. They might look a little better if you have more of that neutral type of warm color there. And look at the difference between the two. So that's how you can use neutral tint in combination with colors that are a little too pure for landscapes, but by putting in a bit of neutral tint, it tones them down. Here's my color swatch where I've taken neutral tint and added it to Hansa Yellow, Naples, Nickel, Quinacridone Gold. Look at that. That is just, it's this section right in here that I find the most interesting, where I've taken neutral tint and the full strength of the paint, and here they all look kind of dark, but then when you add just a bit of water, you get these really beautiful colors. Here's neutral tint, Quinacridone Rose, neutral tint and phthalo blue, which remember, phthalo blue is part of neutral tint, but you add a little bit more phthalo blue and you get this really pretty slate blue. Be perfect for a cloudy day, stormy clouds and stuff. And then here's neutral tint and cobalt teal, which also produces a really pretty color. So play around with neutral tint if you have it. I don't think it's absolutely necessary to have a tube, but if you do have a tube, maybe I've given you some new ideas today on how you can put it to use.